Mr. Alvin Lester, the DG of the Department of the Premier, Dr. Malila, and all members of the public and all members of the media. I'm just going to ask that we start the meeting with a moment of silence for quiet reflection. Thank you very much. Now, I just want to remind everybody for the rules of engagement for these virtual meetings. All members are to be muted at the beginning of the meeting to avoid background noises. Members to flag points of order in the chat function in MS Teams. All videos and audio must be switched off to improve the quality of the connection. If someone is speaking, they may put their mic and video on. You must switch off your mics once you have finished speaking. All presenters to share their own presentations. And that's about it for the rules of engagement. I have an apology from member Aisha Kasim from the EFF and members Mari, Maseko, and Seleko from the DA. Ms. Kluti, is there any other apologies?
Good afternoon, Chairperson. No apologies.
Member Marie, is that a hand?
With your permission, I just want to inform you, we have load shedding starting at 2 o'clock. So I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, hoping it will be later, but you might miss me. But okay. If I can just, before I go off, ask the meeting and the Premier to first try and understand the root causes of previous missions and failures in critical project failures before we develop new ones. And keeping in mind, in 2017, 400 million rand by Patricia de Lille has been allocated to convert landfill sites and phase it out to biogas. I wanted to talk about this, but load shedding won't allow me. I want them to first, that's the first point. The second point, don't let us copycat overseas. We have a different culture here. Anything we create will be destroyed by people taking our cables, even taking whatever we put on their roofs and going to sell it for income. Take everything into account. Let us not copycat overseas solutions. I so much hope that I could be longer. If I can connect by phone, I'll try to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Marie. We will start with the introductions, and then I will hand over to the Premier. I understand the Premier has a presentation that they'd like to go through. And when he's done, we can get to your questions. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask the members to introduce themselves for the record. I'll start with myself. My name is Christopher Fry, and I'm a member of this committee. I'm the chair of this committee.
Good afternoon, Deirdre Bartman, member of the committee.
Good afternoon, Swellen Christians, member of this committee.
Andrikus van der Westhuizen. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Khalil Barankais.
Good afternoon, Chair Derek America, member of the committee.
Good afternoon, Chair Gerrit Pretorius, member of the committee.
Good afternoon, Dan Plato.
Good afternoon, Gillian Postman. I'm an alternate standing in for member Maseko.
Member Dugmore.
Good afternoon, Chair. Cameron Dugmore, also a member of this committee. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other members that I've missed? I don't see any other members here. Mr. Premier, could you introduce yourself and your team as well, please, sir?
Thank you very much, Chair, and to the honourable members. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. It's good to be with you. I'm just having a quick look to see who's all on here from our team. But first of all, Minister Bradell is here. The DG, Dr. Malila, is here. My strategic advisor on energy, Albie Lester, is here. I see HOD Paulser with us, Ida Barnard from the department. I also see Taryn van der Rede from Treasury here. I see HOD Valile Dube here. Have I forgotten anybody? DJ, I don't know if you could see. I can see Robert Shaw, Regan Thor, also from our offices. Thank you very much for joining us. But from a presentation point of view, Chair, and questions and answers, obviously it's myself and Minister Burdell as the political leads, and then from the administration, Dr. Malila, Albie Lester, HOD Paulser, who will be doing the presentation. I will start off by leading in with the first couple of pages. Then from there, Dr. Albie Lester will take us through some of the detail. And then, of course, then we can move into the questions that you have already posed to us as a committee. So the initial part will be a higher level presentation, and then we'll get to those questions. And then, of course, we can get to any issue that you want to raise coming out of these questions. So if we can go ahead, Chair.
Yes, you can. I just want to raise just one more point that member Kaiser Philand is also with us in the meeting. Mr. Premier, you can go ahead. Thank you, sir.
Chairperson, sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Chairperson, sorry, I think I missed the first minute of the meeting, but I would just like to ask, from our last decision, we were unanimous in our view that to have a productive meeting, it would be important that we actually invited the three spheres of government, and we specifically requested that the new Minister for Electricity be appointed, be invited, as well as SALGA, the South African Local Government Association, Western Cape. I just want to ask whether those invitations were extended and whether they will also be part of this meeting.
Thank you, Member Dugmore, for that. We did extend invitations to the National Minister. I was going to give, with your indulgence, I will give feedback with that after the end of the presentation and the questions that we posed to the Premier, because there's quite a lot of feedback that I wish to give to the committee regarding the invitations that we sent and we are busy sending. So that will be addressed in the meeting a bit later, sir.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I just want to place on record my concern about the fact that we don't have those two levels here, because there's no way that we can begin to respond adequately if we do not have a very clear understanding about the interventions of the three spheres of government, and also in particular organized local government, because otherwise we end up with a situation where we don't have a proper context, which was exactly the point that we raised when we said we wanted all of those spheres to be represented in this meeting. But I understand that you have indicated to us. Could I just clarify, so was an invitation also extended to SALGA Western Cape?
Not to SALGA, but we are going to extend invitations to all 30 municipalities to come and brief us on their readiness for the mitigating plans for load shedding. But we will also in our invitations also include SALGA Western Cape, but we have sent a message. We have sent invitations to the acting CEO of Eskom as well as the National Minister of Electricity, and I will give some feedback after the presentation from the Premier and his team.
Chair, may I end this up?
Yes, sorry, Member Christians.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I was also in the first meeting, and the other members can help me if I'm wrong, but the meeting today was with the Premier and the person in his office. That was the meeting that we called for first, and then we will have subsequent meetings with all the role players. But this meeting only, my understanding was that it's only the Premier and Mr. Lester that will present, and then we will have subsequent meetings with the Minister of Energy and all the role players so that we have some understanding. We said in the first meeting that this will be a comprehensive cover, but at least we know what the Premier, the department, and Mr. Lester is saying, and then we'll work through all the rail players. But for this meeting, this was the people that were invited, and I want us to continue with the meeting because that was what we decided on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Christians. Member Parkman.
Chairperson.
Yes. Member
Chair, do you
Dudley.
want-
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Chair, I'm not sure, did you acknowledge Member Bartman?
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I wanted to agree with Member Phelan Christians. It was indicated that we're going to deal with the energy strategy and approach as a general at the first meeting first, as an overview, and that there will be subsequent meetings with all the respective stakeholders. My understanding also of the first meeting was that because there are so many stakeholders, that we might have multiple meetings that stem from this. And I would also like to move that the discussion has been sufficiently dealt with in this regard. Thank you.
Chair, sorry, I seem to be battling with my function to raise my hand, but all I would like to say, not to prolong this issue, the fact that you have clarified that you did invite the Minister of Electricity is a clear indication that the other members are not correct to say that this was only the Premier's department would be invited. The very reason that we motivated, and maybe at the end of this meeting, we can look at the minutes, because clearly we decided that we needed an integrated information on the table. What is national saying? What is the province saying? What is local government saying, and how those align to each other? So I think we have a different understanding, but it's clear to me that the fact that the chairperson briefed us that he did invite the national minister indicates that that was the decision that we took. But without wanting to delay this meeting, Chair, I just want that point recorded in the minutes, please. Thanks.
Sorry. Thank you very much for the deliberations. I think we can move on with the presentation now. Mr. Premier, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before I get on to the presentation itself, obviously you've asked us to come before you. I think first of all, I want to say thank you very much for setting up this ad hoc committee. I think it is critical as our country, our province, our municipalities, and our citizens have to deal with this energy crisis. And I think lessons learned from the pandemic, where an ad hoc committee similar was put in place, which I think is critical in how oversight takes place, especially when we start to see budgets moving in the direction of mitigating this massive risk that we are all facing. And a good oversight, and of course, I think also the oversight of the plans that are being put in place across municipalities, the province, and nationally, as has just been noted. I think it is critical that that this committee sees that alignment. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for calling the meeting. Secondly, you have also sent through a list of questions, and part of our presentation at the end, we will answer those questions. And then what will also happen is DG has already expressed that as soon as we finish, we will obviously circulate this presentation, and we will send formally the answer to those questions to this committee. I also want to say that obviously the points as raised earlier on in this initial part of the discussion, the biogas issue as raised by Member Marais, and any other local government issue might not necessarily be at this point in our presentation. But of course, any question can be raised, and we will see what answers we can get. I presume he's referring to the biogas project in Athlone, or perhaps the 134 megawatts that came through initial plans a few years ago. That has led up to, and you'll see in the report, around about 1,000 megawatts into the system. But you'll see some of it in the report. I also want to say on the record for this committee that myself, Minister Bradell, DG, Ollie Lester have already met with the new energy minister very soon after his appointment. And what we will be presenting today, especially our provincial plan, has already been given to him. And it is critical, as has been said by Member Dugmore, that we make sure that there is good alignment between national, provincial, local, between not only government spheres, but also Eskom themselves, the private sector investment space, municipal space, that we really get that alignment so that we can mitigate this risk and sort out these issues as quickly as possible. Then if we can go to the presentation in slide 1, it is our approach and put it in context. And we've just got 5 slides just ahead, just so I can give you a brief kind of overview. Much of this you probably would have dealt with already or seen, but just to bring it all back, first of all, given the extent of the energy crisis, we've had to establish an energy resilience program. And of course, this is to reduce the load shedding impact on our citizens and businesses in our province. You'll see in the presentation the financial impact. I think all of us as political representatives of the citizens of this province, when you crisscross this province, you can feel the impact of load shedding. It doesn't matter what subject you are raising and at whatever platform across the province, our citizens are showing the frustration and the pressure that they are under. And then, of course, the next level would be on the economy and jobs. It really is putting a lot of pressure on us. So part of this plan, which really started to take shape over and above what we have been doing over the last few years, which I want to say has been sort of a lower level mitigation of risk, investing in the green economy, which we've been doing for many years now, looking at small scale embedded generation projects at local government level. And as of probably the last quarter of last year, a real escalation of the role that the province plays. And so that was definitely to facilitate a lower level of reliance on Eskom in the Western Cape. We've got to a stage where we've had to make these hard decisions because this has been coming on for far too many years. And then I think at the end of last year, looking at the risks of load shedding this year that was given to us by Eskom towards the end of last year, showing that we actually have to step in a very different way, which is exactly what we have done. That has led to, as you see at the bottom of the slide, the establishment of an energy council, the bringing on board of Mr. Lester himself, someone who understands our energy system in the province, really has knowledge of the electrical processes coming from Eskom. And then, of course, as you see in the middle of that slide, the 1.1 billion as set aside. That's to reduce the impact of load shedding, to boost the green economy, the pipeline. Of course, that also links to our ability to reduce our carbon footprint, which, don't ever waste a crisis. This gives us an opportunity for trading into the economies of the world who are already putting lines in the sand with regards to carbon footprint. So I think this gives us the opportunity. It's the scale up of support for municipalities. Of course, remember that when private sector invest, it doesn't happen in the provincial sphere, because it's got to happen in the local sphere where it links into local grids, or it's got to link into the national sphere, which is the national grids. So because that's where the electricity mandate sits. Of course, as a province, we are now also stepping in to that mandate and making sure that we give the support or up the levels of support. That's part of the 1.1 billion. Of course, also identifying the critical transmission for infrastructure upgrades, and much, much more. So if we go to the next slide, in actual fact, the next 2 slides, which you will all know from our discussions on the budget process towards the end of last month, because these have been put into our budget plan for the next 3 years. That's the 1.1 billion and how it's going to be spent, whether it's a load shedding impact reduction from demand side management, alternative energy support programs, supporting SMMEs. So that would be our own internal program in economic development that also would then help and link through to the national environment where tax deductions for the next 2 years have been announced. How do we enable, how do we support the emergency load shedding packs? That's part of one of the questions. How do we support specifically our indigent households in the province while we're trying to get embedded generation, support maximum private sector investment. At the same time, obviously, indigent households are not able to do so. Again, as I said, the green economy, looking at project preparation support, because at the end of the day, it all lands in municipalities. The grid itself, which is a big issue. Our national grid, we've got more than 5 gigawatts of renewable power that can't get into the system because the grid capacity is not there. At the same time, how do we understand the capacity at municipal grid levels? And because that's also where many of these projects are going to be landing, linked that through to the just energy transition and how that is supported both nationally and internationally, looking at the capacity to implement across our whole province. Then operational stuff that's happening with regards to solar PV. Now that you'll see here, it says sorry, DG, this is on the next slide. That's in existing budgets where departments have already got programs in place, where some of our departments are already investing and have been investing. For example, 3 of our hospitals already have solar PV systems in place. And pretty big ones. If I look at the one that I visited in Bellville 2 days ago, that one itself, a 17.5 million rand investment, 1,400 panels, and enough capacity to actually provide energy for the whole of that hospital site. And the same thing, 2 hospitals on the West Coast, and rolling it out to our clinics now. So some of the budgets in our departments were existing. And so we must also remember that we've got to link that through to some of those budgets in that space already, and also probably referring to the education department too. Then if we go on to the next 2 slides, which talk about where and how that investment is taking place, not only our investment as a province, that 1.1 billion over the next 3 years, but if you look at local government investment as well, and if you add up the province and the local government investment into electricity, infrastructure, mitigation of risk, the investment of public sector in this province is now in excess of 7 billion rand, which is a hang of a lot of money over the next 3 years. But that shows you how the direction has had to move in this province to mitigate this massive crisis and this massive risk. So there will be further detail on these slides by Mr. Lester. But there you can see the existing 1 year's expenditure from the Metro, 1.147 billion. You will see, and then if you go to the next, you'll also see on the right-hand side of that slide how it's divided into projects. A number of those projects will be direct infrastructure investment projects in the municipalities. If you go to the next slide, DG, we'll also go into further detail on this and take any questions on it. But as you said earlier, we also need to engage directly with municipalities, also perhaps through SALGA, but you will see our other municipalities divided up by district at 1.9 billion rand across those municipalities. You will see those projects there, like the George Renewable Project, Energy Project of 65 million. The total MTEF, you'll see how it pulls across from next year, right across over the 3 years at 166 million. And so you'll see Knysna, Overstrand, George. We'll go into those details so that we can actually show the full expenditure of these projects, and so that this committee can also keep an eye on how those projects are rolling out over the next 3 years. And then just as a last slide of introduction, which the committee is already aware of, this was outside of the 1.1 billion, but an adjustment that was made early on in this year. And that was because load shedding level 6 really was hitting our local authorities very, very hard, specifically around basic services of potable water, and then making sure that we could actually deal with, during those long periods of load shedding at level 6, deal with the environmental issues linked to sewage leaks and pump systems able to pump sewage. And of course, there's a full gazette that shows you, it's part of our answering of the questions. We'll show you each municipality, how much money they got, what those projects are going to be used for. And we'll also have to, at this committee level, come back as those projects are landed, whether they be generators directly onto pump stations, or perhaps they were able to use solar power and battery for some of those opportunities, or whatever other installation they managed to use that money for to mitigate this urgency in the risk that was faced by our citizens across the province. From that being my introduction to this committee, I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Lester, who will take us through the detail of our actual plan. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you to the Chairman and the committee for allowing me to present. Chair, if you're comfortable, can I proceed?
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on this slide, really, it's just an indication of the extent of the crisis that we're facing in the country. I think we've seen over the years, it's not only happened over the last 3-4 years, but it has happened over a significant period that the energy availability from Eskom has reduced substantially over a period. And this crisis really, it's, it is quite a crisis that cuts quite deep into not only Eskom, but also into the country and the economy of the country. And it won't be resolved quickly because some of these issues, like I say, are quite systemic of nature. And it does require us, maybe as society as a whole, to start looking at this as something that we need to tackle and start to participate in terms of solving. It requires us to look at the complete power sector. The crisis that we're facing is not just a generation crisis. I think we're experiencing load shedding because we have a generation shortage. But I don't think that we must at any one point underestimate the impact of a transmission-driven load shedding event or even a distribution-driven load shedding event, which is quite likely given the fact that we're adding a lot more capacity from a generation point of view. And we have to actually supplement this in terms of an infrastructure investment, both in the transmission and the distribution network, to make sure you can evacuate that energy that you've now brought in from the generation space. So there is quite a bit of work to be done over some time. And I think nationally there is a consciousness around this. And I think in the province, we're quite aligned to what we need to do as well. I think we also require some regulatory change. I think given the fact that the generation space is opening up quite quickly, and we can see new rules being applied in that space, not only by the regulator, but also being promulgated as part of the laws of the country, we can see that the regulatory space will also have to shift accordingly with the shift that we see in the energy space. And I think from a provincial government point of view, as well as from our metro and our local Munics, it's critical because the customers really sit at the end of those networks. They sit at the end of those municipal networks, those low voltage networks. And that's who the customers see when they don't have energy. They do understand that, the shortage of generation comes from an Eskom perspective. But when they have a problem, they pick up the phone, they call their local municipality or local Eskom office and say, we don't have energy. And they don't know if it is load shedding or if it's a fault, but that is the initial port of call. And so there is a bigger role to be played here by provincial and local government. Next slide, DG. I think just again, context for the Western Cape, we've got a fairly good, stable economy. I mean, from a energy perspective, we're probably the third biggest consumer of energy in the country. We've got a significant amount of economic activity in the province. We know from an agricultural perspective, we lead quite a bit in the country as well. But we also see that we have some inequalities that need to be addressed in the province. From a governance perspective, I think, again, you've got a significant number of municipalities that have got fairly good audit reports. They've got unqualified audit reports, which again bodes well in terms of also investment, particularly in the energy infrastructure, because there are a lot of requirements when IPPs come to the table where they look at bankability of municipalities, bankability of customers, and this does bode well in terms of good governance. I think the other thing to note is that from an electricity point of view, again, the province is very well positioned. We are sitting with a very good, diverse energy mix in the province at the moment. We've got nuclear, we've got hydrogen, we've got hydro, we've got wind, we've got solar, and we've also got gas. So yes, we don't have coal, but I don't think we're too stressed about it. But it does create a very nice view of what kind of energy mixes you can and you currently have in the province. And the fact that going forward, we look at diversifying that mix even further. We do have the lowest frequency of network incidents nationally in this province. So when people have faults, this province experiences lower level of faults for shorter durations as opposed to other provinces in the country. And it has got to do with investment that has been made in the past. But again, that investment was not, and we did not make that investment with anticipation of continual load shedding and continued switching on and off of equipment in a network. From a transmission point of view, there's about 49,000 plus kilometers of line across this province, all voltage levels. And we have a significant number of main transmission substations and over 100 distribution substations in the province. So again, there is a good footprint in terms of infrastructure in the province. Next slide, DG. This slide just gives a brief indication of the impact of load shedding. And in 2021, where the average load shedding was actually stage 4, the impact on the economy was between 48 and 61 billion rand. And that's a significant amount of money to lose in such a period, and again due to load shedding. In 2022, it was estimated that we lost about 8.2 billion rand due to load shedding. And I can say to you that if we are going to stay between stages 6 and 4, we estimate we're probably going to lose between 68 and about 78 million rand a day if we are between stages 4 and 6 in the province. The other thing to note is that over the last, I would say the last 10 plus years, we've actually seen a significant decrease in the amount of energy that's actually being utilized or transmitted into the Western Cape. And that percentage has dropped over the years. And it directly has to do with the energy availability from the national distributor. Yes, there are some efficiencies built in, but the dominant sort of portion of that lower transmission energy reaching the Western Cape is because of availability or lack of availability of that energy. So again, just to summarize the slide, we estimate we're going to probably see, if we stay in stages 4 to 6, about 12.8 billion rands worth of load shedding in 2023. And this is really based on the system outlook that Eskom has provided us with to say this is their view of what's going to happen in the next 12 months. And yes, those things get reviewed literally every week and every month. But I must say the last review, the prognosis was actually worse than it was when we previously had it, where we had far more red days that were added in to the quarter. The next slide, did you? This is just an indication of the internal facilities of provincial government. And you can see there's different facilities, health, transport, and the other all catered for here. And you have seen a reduced use of electricity. And again, not a large portion of that is due to efficiencies. It's really due to availability. So the consumption in energy has been lower, but that's because less energy has been available. The next slide is actually a little bit more important, and DG, if we could move to that one. So this slide indicates because we had less energy available, there then was a need to run alternative sources at the time. And this really looks to the running cost of the generators at exactly the same facilities that we looked at the energy consumption for. So there was prolonged use of generators, which then increases the cost of fuel, oil, and grease. But it also means that generators that were really set aside for emergency activity was now being used almost as a baseload energy because we didn't have electricity available. So again, just an indication that, as the electricity availability drops, you will see an increase in the running cost of standby generation. Next slide. The next slide, DG. So from a strategy point of view, and I'll start with the governance, it was touched on, but I want to just formalize and say that we've got an energy council that has been mandated and approved by the provincial government. It's chaired by the Premier, and the membership, I think the terms of reference have been approved, and the membership really consists of all the critical ministers. We've got representation from external bodies. We've got academia. We've got specialists. We've also got representation from local government in our Energy Council. And then depending on the type of agenda and the item we need to deal with, we can also call on subject matter experts to join us at that council. The council is supported by the Energy Council Steercom, which is chaired by DG Malila, and it's then represented by all the HODs within provincial government. And we also then have a technical Steercom, which is the energy resource team, which really does support the Energy Council, where we've got quite a bit of the technical specialists, including myself, sitting, and then reporting both to the Energy Council Steercom as well as to the Energy Council itself. Next slide, DG. This slide really just gives an indication of what kind of resilience has actually been in place in the province, even prior to the program being presented in the last MTech. In the REAP process, which is the national process, and if you look at the column on the left, it's the REAP one. And again, this is available in the province, but I also want to indicate that it's geographically located in the Western Cape. But this energy in the REAP program is not necessarily for the Western Cape. It is for the national operator, where that energy is then evacuated and used across the country. But you can see there was 1,800 megawatts for the Western Cape, which is in commercial operation. There's another 785 megawatts, which is projects in progress at the moment, also in the Western Cape. And if you look at REAP bid round 5, there are a number of, out of the 25 projects, 16 was won by Cape Town-based energy developers. And the additional 5 actually have the offices in the Western Cape. And then in bid round window 6, 4,700 megawatts, which is what bid round window 6 looked at. 24 projects were submitted from the Western Cape to the REAP program, and that has not been allocated yet. But I think the picture we really want to paint is that the Western Cape particularly has become quite a hub for the REAP process, for renewable energy, and definitely is now becoming the center of driving the alternative energy options that we have. We also had the municipal IPP program. And again, you can see quite a bit has gone out. The city just recently published its 500 megawatt dispatchable energy tender. Prior to that, they had a 200 megawatt tender that they had also put out. And then we've got Stellenbosch with their 50 megawatt tender that they've also gone to the market with. The wheeling arrangements, there's also, again, activity taking place in the province. 470 megawatts of wheeling arrangements. And this is really between private sector projects where people that have their own generation wanting to then wheel across either municipal or Eskom network to other private customers sitting on the other end of that network. And there's about 470 megawatts of those worth of projects sitting in the province. And then, of course, we have the Municipal Energy Resilience Program, which was in place prior, where the 7 municipalities are getting support from provincial government in the form of wheeling frameworks, tariff support, cost of supply studies, as well as electricity master planning updates that are taking place. And then we do obviously have in the Western Cape about 1,820 megawatts of transmission capacity. And this is really the 2 400 kV lines that run from the north into the Western Cape, as well as a 765 line that also runs from the north into the Western Cape, which really gives us transfer capacity of about 1,820. On the small scale embedded generation, 24 municipalities have been supported on the SSEG framework. 21 are actually able to provide pricing for feed-in tariffs. And then 197 megawatts of SSEG was registered by municipalities. Now, literally, this means that they have customers that are in their network that are now looking at their own generation that have registered with their municipality. And the sum of those actually is about 197 megawatts of private residential solar that people are looking at for themselves. And this is mainly in the city of Cape Town. From a business perspective, We've assisted over 5,000 businesses with the green economy support, and this is very much where businesses are looking at alternatives and options coming out of the green economy. So if we start to talk about the development and or manufacturing of solar-related equipment, we've assisted a number of businesses in terms of their planning activities and opportunities that they could explore. We've also seen a significant amount of people downloading the reports that we've been able to generate, over 10,000, and this really gives a good indication of what the plans are in terms of water and energy in the province, and then also what our views are on things like EV and so on. And then yes, maybe just closing on the slide, there's about 12.9 billion rands worth of investment within the green economy, where we've seen that there's a large interest in actually moving to a decarbonized, lower carbon economy for the province. Thank you, DG. Next slide. So just to give a little bit more detail around what we're planning to do, I think really there's two approaches to what we're looking at. The one is to make sure that we can reduce the impact of load shedding on both the citizens and the businesses in the province. And then to facilitate a lower level of reliance on the national generator of energy. And we've set ourselves some good targets. We've said we want to be between 5 and 750 megawatts in the short term, and that should be by 2025. We then want to reduce the offtake between up to about 1,800 megawatts by 2027, and that would be our medium-term target for megawatts. And the long-term target is about 5,700 megawatts by 2035. And this would really be in addition to what the Eskom energy is currently in the province. And this would focus very much on municipal generation as well as sort of private generation in the province. So if we look at those initiatives and the focus areas, you will see that we've got about, I think it's close to 18 projects that we're initiating, which I think we did actually take to the MTech. But if you look at disaster mitigation management, that runs between the short and the medium term. And what we're looking at here is looking at how do we ensure that we can implement business continuity plans within the municipality and within provincial government as well as the private sector. There is a huge communications component that we have to take into account. There are alternative energy supplies for critical municipalities, and I think some of it we've already started to tackle. And then the same for small and medium businesses as well. And our focus is very much on how do we help the lower LSM households, particularly in the time of load shedding. And to this end, we have spoken about, our launching the load shedding packs, which I think we'll share some more information with you in the Q&A. From a strategic perspective, I think there are a few things that we'd like to tackle, both in the short, medium, and long term. The one is that we definitely need to look at a provincial integrated resource plan. And this is really just us saying that we need to understand what is going to be our energy needs over the next 50 years. What options are available over those periods? And what type of investment would we need to make to actually achieve the kind of energy requirement that we would need over the next 50 years? And we've got to start to model some of these things as well. So we are also taking our cue from the national IRP, but also looking at what's required locally in terms of both our geography, technology maturity, and as well as the costing of that technology. And we've also seen quite a bit of interest in terms of people wanting to partner around this, around the energy discussion, is how can we do this as well? I think if you look at the again on the left side, the purple columns, we've got demand side management, our generation, procurement and trading of low carbon energy, as well as our maintenance and expansion of infrastructure. This is also again in the short, medium and long term. There is going to be a DSM program that we are initiating in the province. I must also at this point probably add that we've had quite a good discussion with our colleagues nationally, and there's fairly good alignment in terms of the national program run through NECOM, as well as our DSM program in the province. We're looking at our energy efficiency program, which will have a number of components to it. It will focus largely on both the public sector in terms of the energy efficiency in our own facilities, but also in the private sector. We would have to then start to encourage alternative energy options, as well as efficiency programs at some of our bigger corporates, and then look at how do we actually measure and verify those savings. One of the things that we have tabled is if we're able to reach a baseline saving or a saving based on our baseline, that we would be able, or we have requested the National Minister to consider if we could be exempted from a stage or 2 of load shedding, given the fact that we internally setting those baselines in the province and achieving those savings. Next slide, Digi. Again, just some more details on our DSM, our generation and our transmission, our network infrastructure upgrade plan. I think very much what we want to do in the generation procurement space is to look at what we call distributed generation, and to have generation as close as you possibly can to your end customer, because it has, one, the advantages of lower losses in terms of your energy flow, but it will also significantly reduce the cost of your energy the closer you are to your customer. It also gives you resilience in a system. So if you have multiple generation points in a municipality, even if you were to lose one point, because the system has multiple injection points, you could quite easily be able to swing load and supply those points. So it does give you a lot more resilience the closer you are to your customer base, having your generation at that point. Again, in the medium to long term, I think we've got to couple that with the required maintenance as well as the expansion of the infrastructure, both at a transmission and distribution level. Again, we cannot be bringing on new generation and not having sight of the fact that we need to evacuate that energy over transmission and or distribution line. And those lines and those substations would have to be upgraded to be able to cope with this additional capacity. Next slide, Digi. And all of this really has to be supported by an investment plan. And we really do want to look at, again, what's available in the JET IP for us, but also what's available from municipalities, from private sector, even from provincial government, to say, if we are going to then look at this RRP over the next 50 years, we do need to talk about the additional generation, our demand side management, our network infrastructure upgrade, as well as our new generation plan. We'll have to understand what it is going to cost us to do this and over what period can we do it, and what's affordable to both the people and to the province. Next slide, Digi. So this is just unpacking the 1.1 billion that has been allocated by province to the different projects. So if you look at our load shedding relief program, again, over the period, we've set aside 115 million for that. For our provincial RRP, which is really our long-term plan, we've set aside about 11.5 million for that. And those really do inform things like our new generation program, our network development program, as well as our demand side management program. And you can see our plan is to spend between those three programs between 11.1 million. There's a 381 for the new generation, because that is really where the bulk of the activity, that's where the megawatts hits the network. And then our network development plan, which is really our infrastructure upgrade, is about 15.84 billion. So there is quite a bit of effort being put into that. Next slide, DG. So aside from the 1.1 billion that we're looking at, we know that the city is going to be putting in about 3.9 billion over the MTEC period as well. And this year alone, 23-24, the city is going to spend about 1.147 billion in their program. And quite a bit of it is infrastructure upgrade. So if you look at the table on the right, the city is going to upgrade what they call the Triangle 132 upgrade, which is really a sort of a distribution network that links the cities. So the city split itself into your northern and southern suburbs, and then you've got the central area. And so this triangular network really looks at how do we upgrade the high voltage, or the highest of the distribution voltage, how do we upgrade that across those areas between the northern, southern suburbs and then the central part of the Cape. Then there's some very specific areas They're going to be replacing some equipment in the northern area. You can see 60 million is their plan to be spent. Then they're looking at, when they replace their vehicles, to look at more EV friendly vehicles that they'll be looking at, and they're going to be looking at 45 million in each one of the periods, the spend periods. And in the Bellville South main ring, which is a network out there, you're going to have a substation upgrade, which is going to cost you about 42.9 million. I do want to say that this is only an upgrade. To rebuild a sub of that size, it'll cost you close to 100 million. So these are upgrades to take the additional capacity that's going to come in. And you can see the same in again, if we look at the remaining municipalities where we're going to spend about 1.9 billion over the same period, you can see a lot of it again focused on infrastructure. There is some set aside for electrification that will take place, both through informal settings as well as some of the low-cost housing areas. But you can see a lot of it is transformation upgrades, high voltage substation upgrades, Stellenbosch, Swartland areas. In Saldanha, we're going to have a 66 substation upgrade that's taking place. And in the Overstrand, we're going to have a 66 to 11 substation upgrade as well. So a lot of it is really positioned around getting that infrastructure to the point where it can actually handle that additional generation that will come online. So just the areas that we believe that there's opportunity for us to partner with private sector, other public sector entities, etc. If we look at it from a technical perspective, I think there's a definite need for us to look at the IRP that we want in the province. We will definitely want to see how do we get some technical support around things like transaction advisory support services, both for the municipalities that are part of the MIR as well as the ones that will come into the program at a later stage. And we have what we call also mini transaction advisory services for schools as well as clinics. And that's for the PV projects that we're looking at for schools and clinics as well. And then again, mapping out and planning all the energy infrastructure upgrades that's going to require. And that's again the transmission and distribution infrastructure upgrades, substation and lines. So there's again an opportunity for us to then collaborate on a technical level, and then the same with the green hydrogen. I think if we look at potential to co-finance, I think there is really a good opportunity if you look at an ESCO model as an example for schools and clinics, where you do have small electricity supply companies that are willing to put capital into these types of investments. And then obviously we'd have to look at what are the conditions and the terms. But again, if you have transaction advisory services available, they will help you with those types of services. We've also engaged with the private sector as well as other municipalities in the Western Cape to see how do we actually look at the load shedding packs and extended those load shedding packs. So in the initial numbers that we had quoted, we're saying that there's potential to increase that numbers, and how do we get the private sector on board to assist with this? And then the opportunity again for us to look at piloting and scaling the renewable energy option for municipalities. And this is our containerized PV option, where we'd like to save some towns from load shedding in the short term. But again, a real opportunity for us to work with the private sector to scale that up quite a bit. And then we have already started with alternative energy support to SMMEs, where we have engaged SMMEs already in terms of what's available in the market. What is the process that they would need to follow both within provincial government and then within local national government in terms of the tax reprieve that they would get on alternative energy for an SMME. And then, of course, demand side management, which really does focus on the public at large. But again, opportunity for us to engage with the private sector in terms of some of the big corporates and the kinds of efficiencies that they can bring to the table, and how do we work with them. So maybe just in summary, I think from a provincial perspective, the Western Cape is really well positioned in terms of its energy mix. I think we need to, as a collective, drive energy security. For the people of the province, we can create a resilient economy. We've got good governance here. We've got a good track record. We've managed a number of big programs quite well. So I think it bodes in our stead that we can do this. I think we must look at strategic partnerships going forward. I think if we're talking about a 50-year plan, we've got to start thinking about what kind of investments and arrangements do we start to look at and consider now, and the work we need to do now to achieve that 50-year plan. But we're also looking at how do we crowd in support and financing around some of these strategic opportunities that we have, both from a technical and from a capacity perspective. And again, I think the whole approach is to make sure all of us, including the residents of the Western Cape, that we not only benefit from this, but we actually all party to the solutions that we have for this province. DG, I think that would be the last slide. Thank you.
Alfie, thank you very much. I mean, Chair, between myself and HOD Paulse, we will now deal with the last part, which is the parliamentary questions. Now, you have written a letter to Premier and myself earlier this week, obviously asking for this particular meeting. And in fact, in that letter, you've asked a range of questions, from obviously, how do we prioritize the municipalities in terms of the energy emergency funding? Graham will deal with that. And then there's about 3 questions that deals with the issue around independent power producers. I mean, I will deal with that response, but I see HOD Dube is also on the line. So if there are any questions, we can also throw 1 or 2 of those questions to him. And then question 3 deals with the same. And then question 4 just deals with the whole issue around the wastewater treatment facilities. That's also linked to the 88 million, and Graham can deal with that. And then I will provide you with a status update on the progress report. So, Chair, I'm now going to ask HOD Paulse just to speak to the issue around the allocation of the 88 million emergency funding that was allocated to the municipalities sort of in the second, third last week of March. Graham, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, DG. Good afternoon, Chairperson, members, also to the Premier and the Minister and colleagues on the platform. This slide just relates to the 88 million, 89 million that we transferred to municipalities during the first quarter of this year. So towards the end of last year, just given the amount of load shedding hours that municipalities have experienced, there were significant risks and impact, particularly in relation to the water treatment works as well as the wastewater treatment works. We had various requests from municipalities to assist from citizens, given the impact, particularly around water. What we have done at that stage is where there were generators available in the province and also national, try to get hold of these generators and rotate them as a need arose in the certain municipalities. Just given the amount of hours of load shedding and the need for assistance and support from municipalities, Minister Bedell then wrote to Minister Winger in terms of Section 25 to ask for funding as an emergency so that we can support municipalities with backup generators, particularly at the waterworks and the wastewater treatment works, but that also included the various pump stations. So our own engineers of the Department of Local Government had 3 different engagement sessions with all the municipalities to identify only the critical infrastructure, the wastewater treatment works, as well as the water treatment works in municipalities, the various pump stations. And based on a detailed analysis, we've then drafted a submission to identify what is a critical infrastructure, or otherwise a key infrastructure in municipalities in relation to water and sanitation. We've then, based on the size of the generator required, on the size of the pump station, the size of both the water treatment works as well as the wastewater treatment works, and in consultation with municipalities, identified the size of generators, and based on that detail, then allocated the funding to municipalities to procure or otherwise acquire these generators for the critical pump stations as well as the water treatment works. What you will see is we haven't given to all the treatment works in municipalities. You will see that we've also given funding to district municipalities for smaller generators. So where there are areas that were not supplied with a generator in a municipality, those were roaming generators and could be actually rotated among certain areas or towns and so on. But the idea was
if there's a water treatment works or wastewater treatment works that service more than one town, that would have been classified as a critical water infrastructure or a wastewater infrastructure plant. We've excluded the city. The city has actually assisted us as a province. And if I talk to the city about the city, you can think about Laingsburg. They've provided us with a generator to Laingsburg, and they've also had their own program. So we've excluded the city in this regard. Our agreement with the municipalities was that they would be responsible for the maintenance and the diesel. And each municipality has actually signed a MOU, but also an agreement with us that while we'll supply the funding for the purchasing of the generator, that they will be responsible for the maintenance, the safekeeping, and the diesel and the running costs of those generators. Thank you, DG.
Thank you very much for that. Chair, then there were 3 questions dealing with IPPs. The first one, obviously, is which municipalities will be benefiting and getting electricity from the independent power producers with funding provided from the Premier's budget. I mean, I can report that we've done a thorough municipal project selection process. We obviously look at factors such as the municipal readiness, which is important, the energy policy of the respective municipalities, council support, internal capacity, financial, and some other factors in terms of good governance practices, etc. We've also done some pre-feasibility studies for municipal IPP procurement on the 4 municipalities, and therefore for those 4 municipalities are Drakensberg, Mossel Bay, Saldanha, and Stellenbosch. We are currently working to secure transactional advisory service because you can understand this is a highly specialized area. And transactional advisory service is not only in relating to, let's call it, engineering capacity, but it's also financial, legal, etc. And also working to secure, a project officer capacity support for the implementation of the pioneering project at Stellenbosch municipality. We are also investigating the viability of a municipal pool buying mechanism, and Alvi has spoken to that quite at length. Initially, we want to focus on 4 municipalities, which is obviously Drakensberg, Stellenbosch, Saldanha, and Mossel Bay, as well as the city of Cape Town, given that the city has done a lot of work in this space already, and the city has got a very solid team working within the energy space. And what we're also doing is we're also exploring initiatives around project preparation facilities. And in the financing slide that the Premier as well as Alvi has spoken about, you will see that we've also allocated some money to deal with project facilitation facilities, and the Treasury is also providing support in that regard, as well as the Department of Infrastructure. Then, Chair, the other sub-questions dealt with the issue around the service level agreement with these municipalities in terms of obviously continuity and availability, including in terms of purchasing electricity from IPPs. Our response is really that the agreement between an IPP, that's an independent power provider, and Stellenbosch municipalities in the form of a power purchase agreement. I mean, that's integral to the procurement process, and the municipality of Stellenbosch is in the process to embark on that process. And obviously, we will take this also, from a learning perspective, and when we roll it out further, we will take, some of the learnings into that process. PPA agreement is generally between 15 and 20 years. I mean, we can understand it's a massive infrastructure investment, and it's like paying down a bond. Whoever comes in, whoever wants to invest, obviously wants to know that they're going to make certain returns over a period of time. And also given the fact that we want to look at long-term solutions in relation to this, it's typically 15 to 20 years. And that's why the requirement for a transaction advisor, both from a financial as well as a legal perspective, is quite key in this respect. Obviously, what we've done is all potential risks to the contract are defined in such an agreement, together with the measures how to mitigate some issues, as well as it also allows for some penalty regimes. Obviously, Chair, from a supply chain perspective, the normal supply chain rules will apply. The municipalities' preferential procurement policies would be taken into account, and obviously all the legislative requirements to make sure that we comply with all the supply chain rules that will be in place. And in relation to obviously the pricing of electricity, all indications and research shows that the price of electricity from renewable energy IPPs should be cheaper than the current Eskom tariff. Obviously, that's over time, because also what the agreement allows for is for stability, at least in terms of increases. I mean, currently, nobody knows what the price of electricity is going to be next year, because I mean that's a nationally determined process. And I mean, if we looked at the last couple of years, a lot of the price increases have been way more than inflation. So what this IPP agreement or the PPA agreement would allow for is at least some stable stability in terms of inflation or projected inflation increases, and that it also allowed the municipality, I think, to make sure that the financial models actually work out. And I mean, the last bullet just really deals with the whole issue around CPI increases, and obviously that will be taken into the final agreement. Okay, then you asked a question around the IPP model that will be utilized. The IPP will build and run the facility. They'll also sell the energy to the municipality. So it's typically, how Eskom works. It's similar to how it does its bulk purchase from Eskom at the moment, but it's just an independent power provider. Then the IPP obviously takes on all risks. So this is a typical triple P kind of arrangement, if you understand. That means they need to secure the land. They must make sure that all the authorizations are in place, the designs, the financing, build, maintenance, and operate the power plant. And therefore, the previous point I made in relation to stability around inflation increases, etc., the independent service provider will also pick up, some of that risk. Obviously, if you pick up risk, some of that risk comes with cost. It means that they need to build it into, all their financial models and also into all the agreements. But at least the risk for future increases and those things don't sit with the municipalities or with actually the users of energy, being the citizens and business. And an IPP will take all those things into account. And then lastly, the municipality shall purchase from the IPP based on the agreed tariffs in the PPA agreement, and also in terms of all the terms and conditions that relates to annual increases in that agreement. Okay, I'm now going to ask HOD Paulse. This is the second last slide, and then I will talk about the status in terms of procuring the energy packs, and then I will ask Premier to make some concluding comments. So Graham, can you just deal with the issue around the wastewater treatment facilities in the province?
Thanks, DJ. Thank you, Chairperson. So, as I said, we've also identified the critical wastewater infrastructure in the province. Those plants that were at higher risk of polluting rivers and also the sea. So we've done that analysis when we identified which are the wastewater treatment plants or installations that we need to support and fund that could possibly, if not dealt with properly, could then present a health risk. And what comes to mind is immediately Swellendam Dam. I mean, they were on the verge of losing their wastewater treatment works. And obviously, given the fact they were off 2 days because of a substation that blew of Eskom, and we had to intervene. But in time, we got a generator. Should we have lost that wastewater treatment plant, it would have taken us anything between 6 months to a year to recultivate the bacteria in the wastewater treatment plants. But we're also working in terms of our CDAF program. And in that program, we actually prioritize both water and wastewater infrastructure projects within municipalities. We're also working very closely with the National Department of Water and Sanitation. They make available their rapid response teams to help municipalities with risk abatement plans in relation to their wastewater treatment works. But this also helps to reduce the pollution of the rivers and also obviously the sea. We are using the Water Services Infrastructure Grant. We're using also the MIG, the Municipal Infrastructure Grant, as well as the RBIC, the Bulk Infrastructure Grant, so that we can actually prioritize particularly water infrastructure, but there's also wastewater infrastructure in the province. And then with the assistance of the National Department of Water and Sanitation and with the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, obviously issuing pre-directives and directives, and we use this to prioritize wastewater treatment plants where there is a elevated risk in the province. And then just lastly, Chairperson, what we also do is we're working with the National Department. The National Minister has published what we see, it's the green drop status, and that gives you indication of the wastewater treatment plants within the province. The blue drop status reports have also been published, and that is in relation to the water treatment works within the province. So we work collaboratively in the province with our national partners and our local partners to ensure that the services in relation to water and wastewater treatment plants are functional in the province. Thanks.
Okay, then my last slide just deals with the process of procuring and distributing the emergency energy packs. Now, this is not an easy assignment, Chair. So firstly, we've done a lot of work in this space, and what the initial research has shown us that generally indigent residents require three issues. They require the capability for lighting, and then they require the capability for heating, and in emergency also the capability for charging. So we've taken that into consideration as step one. Then, Chair, what we've done as part of step two was to determine, so how do we actually decide on who gets these specs and who don't actually get these specs. So what we've done is we've gone through an extensive consultation process. So we've met, with municipal managers. We've also met with some external institutions and also some NGOs, given the fact that we said, these are sort of the three things that people required. And what we've done is we've actually determined, so how we're going to do it and what approach are we going to use to rolling out this initiatives. And I need to say, Chair, because I said it's not an easy thing. Currently, the beneficiary selection criteria as well as the approach to rolling out the project is still under discussion, because obviously all of this need to go into a plan that we will put out there, when we're going to call for tenders, because we want to have an independent provider that will be rolling out all these emergency energy packs for us. And obviously, when you get an independent person, you need to determine what it is that you want to do, where is it that you want to do, and who are you going to get to be involved. For now, in our discussions with the municipalities, it is quite clear that the only or one of the key things that one needs to consider is the indigent registers. It's a well-established mechanism. Each municipality have got their own indigent register. They know who the indigent people are, and we also know that the indigent, if you want to be on the indigent register, it's also based on your income levels, etc. So in all probability, we will use the indigent register of the different municipalities. So we are still in consultation with them. Chair, what we're also doing is we're also looking at co-funding of the program. So we've already had discussions with the city of Cape Town and some municipalities, as I've indicated. And I think Alva's also spoken about the issue around how do we pull in the private sector to also support with some of these issues that we want to do, as well as obviously the distribution of some of these energy packs. I think this is going to be a major initiative. My commitment to the legislature when I appeared before the legislature in relation to my own vote was that this is something that we need to get going, and obviously we would like communities to have these at least before the end of winter, noting that we need to go through a full-on procurement process, and obviously there will be full transparency in this entire process. And what we also want to do is obviously limit the involvement to officials, either in municipalities or within the province. So, Chair, I think this initiative is really going to assist our poorer communities to really enable them, firstly, to make sure that they have lights, that they have the ability to heat. And obviously, this we're talking about heating your food, etc., at least keeping your food warm, and then also the ability to charge. Part of the lighting option is also to look at other issues outside of only indigent households, but also, and Premier spoke about it, is how do we enable our matriculants, particularly in your poorer communities. So it's typically, those kids that sits within quintiles 1 to 3 schools, the poorest of the poor, those matriculants. And then in addition to that, also, how do we roll this out to our elderly, and particularly those sitting in old age home and secure care facilities that's already supported by the province, but that they can at least ensure that, when the energy or the electricity goes out, that they can at least, switch on a light and be able to do what they need to do. And then obviously in the case of the matriculants, is that the matriculants are able, to do their studies and to eventually be successful when they write their matric exam and not be dependent on ESCOM exclusively. Lastly, we're also looking at options that is not just dependent on them charging it into a normal Eskom plug. We're also looking at options, where we can use it's kind of a solar option where people can actually charge it by using, energy from the sun. So, Chair, those are our responses. I will, as Premier has committed, post this meeting, send the responses to the committee formally, so that we know it's actually on record. So, Chair, you can see that we've developed a comprehensive program how to deal with this. Premier, I'm going to hand over to you to deal with the concluding comments, and then I think back to the chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Thank you very much, HODs and Ms. Lester, and everybody involved in putting the presentations together. Chair, perhaps this last point, obviously it is complex, as you can hear from the DG's presentation, but we've got complexity on the one side and we've got urgency on the other side because of course, we need this procurement process to run so that we can, get it in as quickly as possible. Winter is going to have worse load shedding, and you can feel the temperature reduction. So, it's putting all of our systems under pressure, but we've got to make sure we get this going as quickly as possible. Just this specific one, but of course, it's all of them, and the prioritization of each of these projects. To try and make sure that we mitigate this massive crisis and this massive risk to all of our citizens as quickly and efficiently as possible. But Chair, I don't want to say any more. I think a lot has been said now in these presentations. I think the best is to hand back to you if there are questions for clarity, etc. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you to your team for the comprehensive presentation. Members, I'm now going to open the floor for questions. I think we will take, if I can ask that we have 3 questions per member per this round. I see 1 hand, I see 3 hands. Okay. Member Christians, Member Bartman, Member Dugmore, Member van der Westhuizen, and Member Nkondlo, in that order. Member Christians?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I think it was quite a lengthy one, a lot to absorb. But Chair, just to hear from maybe Mr. Lester or somebody that can answer us. We always see and we always hear from people, panicking to say, are we staring, I'm talking specifically in the Western Cape, a total blackout? Now, people are fearing that we will have now with winter coming and that, the energy demands will be high. People are fearing a total blackout. If Eskom should fail, does the province have enough electricity, to cover certain areas? I don't know. It's a question. And I just want to know, does the province have a plan if we have a total collapse of the grid, total blackout? That's number 1, Chair. And number 2 is, if I heard Mr. Lester correctly, we will only be rid of Eskom 2035. 2035, we will be off the grid, if that is, if I understood him correctly. And secondly, you have the Eskom grid and you also have the province putting energy into the grid, a balance. So where will we as a province say, I know we're going to be off the grid 2035, if I understand correctly, but where as a province, we have generation from Eskom and the province. Will there be a time where the province is looking that there will be no load shedding in the Western Cape? What is the earliest that we can think that there will be, looking at Eskom and the province? Where do Mr. Lester or somebody knows where will we be? We already now in city of Cape Town, when the national is 3, we are 2. But where will we be free of load shedding? That is a lot of the questions that we're getting from the public. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you, Member Christians. Member Bartman?
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask my questions, I just want to say welcome to the Western Cape Provincial Government, to Mr. Lester. The last time I interacted with him, he was still at Eskom, and he always assisted myself and the committee with energy queries from our constituencies, and the time of day was always irrelevant. So firstly, thank you for your service. My first question is, Currently, all the provinces, we get majority of our money from the division of revenue nationally, which is a combination of equitable shares and conditional grants. And in the 2023 division of revenue, there was no money for provincial governments across South Africa for energy or helping to end load shedding. And we are now using our own provincial money to become load shedding free. When the Premier and the Minister of Local Government met with the Minister of Electricity nationally, did you lobby him for more money for provinces to help end load shedding? And if so, what did he say? If not, will you commit to lobbying him for money for provincial governments to help end load shedding across South Africa? Because it's not just Western Cape that must become load shedding free. We must all work to become load shedding free. My second question is, I just want to check if I heard correctly. Mr. Lester indicated that the National Minister of Electricity indicated that if the Western Cape reaches a minimum baseline as a province, that we can ask to become exempted from load shedding. So in that regard, what is that minimum baseline that we need to reach? And then my final question stems from this. Given that the demand side management program is going to be crucial then to reach such a minimum baseline, which sectors are we as a province going to target, and how will this demand side management program be rolled out? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Bartman. I did see Member Dugmore's hand, and I know he had some problems with it.
Yes,
Member
I just
Dugmore-
seem to be, thanks, Chair. I just seem to be battling to indicate the icon on my laptop. But thank you very much, Chair, and also to the Premier and Mr. Lake and the DG for the presentations. I'll just run through my questions quickly. In regard to the 40 million for project preparation, can we please have a detailed breakdown of that, an indication of the procurement processes that will be followed in regard to that, but a detailed breakdown of the 40 million. Then there's a 2 million for the specialist. Could I just ask, is that Mr. Albie Laker's salary, the 2 million? And then in regard to the 60 million for the PACs, the DG did give some explanation, but clearly if you look at everyone who's registered for the indigent grant, which comes from national government, that 60 million will not cover all. So could we have a breakdown of how many people will benefit from this, from which municipalities that 60 million will be spent? Then in regard to the 40 million for LED lighting, if we could also have a similar breakdown, who will receive those LED lightings broken down per municipality. Then I think the key question which has not been answered at all, which hopefully Mr. Laker can answer, is what is the estimated cost per unit to the consumer from all of these particular initiatives? And then could Mr. Laker please respond to whether he believes that the surcharge levied by the municipality of Cape Town, which, whether that surcharge has been agreed to by the National Electricity Regulator and also any other municipality which charges a surcharge on the Eskom power, whether those have in fact been approved by the National Electricity Regulator. So we actually need a price. We need a,
I did say 3 questions per round. Could you wrap up for this round and you can ask any questions in the next round, please?
Okay, then the last question relates to, could we have the actual names of the members of the Energy Council, and are the trade unions and civil society also invited to the Energy Council like we have at a national level in regard to NEDLAC and also the structure which has been set up by the President? Thank you.
Thank you, Member Dugmore. Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentation. Chairperson, I believe there's a lot of potential for the private sector to assist with the enormous investment in infrastructure that we need. But unfortunately, the private sector mostly base their decisions on monetary grounds, loss of production, loss of productivity versus the costs. And then also for residential users, I think for them, again, the moment they see that it's making monetary sense to invest in PV panels, etc., we may see quite a big investment. Now, do you believe that the 15,000 Rand per annum rebate for taxpayers will have the necessary effect or be a big enough incentive for the large-scale rollout of PV panels in, for example, residential areas? And then to link onto the Honourable Bartman's question, because I think what we as a province and many municipalities would like to do is, like the city of Cape Town, to get some form of relief from load shedding levels. To what extent and how will we be able to negotiate such agreements with Eskom? Because my impression is that this is a national grid, and obviously Eskom will welcome anybody that makes a contribution to lessen the burden on them now. But it seems to me that, you know, the time to negotiate such agreements is now, when the crisis is there. And then lastly, third question, obviously I'm also concerned about service delivery through provincial institutions such as our schools, clinics, etc. And I'm really concerned as a former educator about, you know, matrics having to write exams in poorly lit school halls and other places where they, you know, will have to write. I'm concerned about, you know, teachers not being able to project PowerPoint presentations, use data projectors or the old overhead projectors, or make photocopies, etc. So, and I know that we've got, you know, hundreds of schools that are probably in need of such, you know, relief from load shedding, because in a school you only have those 5-6 hours every day, and if you have 4 hours of load shedding during that limited morning period, then I think our schools would be severely affected by this. So to what extent do we as a province believe that we can assist our schools with that? Thank you.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen. Member Nkondlo, your questions, please.
Thank you, Chairperson of the Ad hoc Committee. Greetings to the Premier and his team. Chair, my question, the first one relates to in this 1.1 billion being referred to, and the infrastructure projects that have already been identified, I think in the earlier slides that the Premier was referring to. I'm interested to know from the Premier and the team that in the Western Cape, how many of the townships that are in the Western Cape are gonna be targeted and actually have infrastructure, and particularly electricity infrastructure project, and can we be provided with detail of such, if any? My second question, Chair, is that I'm also interested that given what has been raised as the emergency funding and the whole program of this energy response, what is the current storage capacity for the electricity, for the energy to be generated across the various sources, and at what level of such storage capacity are we as the province having built such storage capacity? My last one, which is my third question, Chair, is that I see on one slide on the electrification of informal areas, we're told of Knysna and Overstrand. Can we be provided with details of how many households are being, will be part of this program in both of these municipalities? And is this in line with the number of housing which will be provided in this particular financial year? Because then my worry is what is then the gap of the other municipalities where housing will be provided, given the fact that recently in the division of revenue, I think in the grants, the allocations were made on the energy efficiency and demand side management grant. Also, the Integrated National Electrification Program grant was also allocated. And I'm interested to understand whether these the monies that were being raised here, are they going to be coming from the 1.1 billion that the Premier has allocated, or it will be supplemented from also the grants that are coming from National Treasury? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. Member Brinkers, I do see your hand. Is it a pressing question, or can we do it in the second round?
Thank you very much, Chair. No, it's fine. We can do it in the second round. I'm fine with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Premier and your team, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I'm going to go straight over to that first question, the grid collapse plan. And I think either Minister Bradell or actually Paulson should deal with that one. And let's start with that, and then we'll work through the questions. That was from Honourable Christians.
Thank you, Minister Bradell. HOD Paulson.
Colleagues, thank you, Premier. Thank you, colleagues. Honourable Chair, to the Honourable Member, we must always understand that the chances are very, very slim for something like that to happen. That's why we've got load shedding. We will rather go into a stage 8 or stage 10 or stage 12, but at all costs, we will prevent this, the regulator will prevent the grid from collapsing, because you must remember that will create complete chaos. And you need another country to restart you, and then we go into that whole disaster plan. So the chances are very, very slim. We prepare for a stage 6 and upwards. What we are worried about is that we don't understand currently how the grid will react above level 6. We've seen in some instances, like in Swellendam, that when after load shedding and you restart, then either substations blew up, etc. There's a lot of stress on the system. So we keep a very close eye on it, and that's why we've also do have a blackout plan, and we're trying to take that throughout or through Parliament to our other provinces, because it's important to understand the different phases and what will happen. I am worried, as long as there's no political interference into the regulator to determine when to load shed, what levels to load shed, I'm quite confident that that we won't get into a blackout phase. We will rather go to a stage 10 or 12, meaning that we're half a day off of electricity and the economic disaster that will happen from there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Chair, what I'm going to do is I'll just go through some of these questions, and then after that I will hand over to DG and Mr. Lester, and then we'll just see if we should be able to cover all of them then. I think the second point as raised by, and obviously Mr. Lester, I'm sure he can come in here as well, but he spoke about the 2035 date and the 5,700 megawatts, which is more than we use at the moment. Our peaking use is around 4,000 megawatts. The plan is to make sure that we have enough energy provision enabled between now and 2035. My feeling is that looking at the speed of implementation, happen quicker than that. But I do want to get one point across. While we want to become energy self-sufficient and energy resilient, and we are busy with our urgent plans of saying we want to mitigate load shedding levels, I want to be clear that we are not, I think it'd be crazy to be off the grid. That's why we are asking for individual investors to please remain on the grid. We would like to see all the small embedded generation being able to sell power back to municipalities. So it's not about off the grid. We must get that right. So at the end of the day, that's going to come out of the RP of our energy mix, but we don't want to disconnect from Eskom. We can't disconnect from Eskom. So Eskom will always have some percentage of power that gets delivered into the grid. And of course, as the grid separation happens, where there'll be a separate company to the generation, and you'll have a grid company, of course, they will be key partners in the future of what it's going to look like. But that will come out of the RP. And just my point that I want to raise is this: not about saying the Western Cape is going to be totally off the grid. That's not what we're saying here. We want to be energy resilient. We want to be energy sufficient, but we also want to play our part in the South African context of energy, whether it's drawing power or putting power into the system. Then perhaps on the Honourable Bartman, of course, we will lobby national. I must say that in our first meeting with the Energy Minister, we did not make that meeting a flat-out lobby meeting. It was his first meeting with him and his two advisors, along with our team. We actually spoke about partnerships. We spoke about how we can help each other. We understood, that he's only just getting to grips with his new portfolio. Of course, we know him because we know him from Infrastructure South Africa. We know him well. So we said, here, we wanting to be a partner. We actually gave him our 1.1 billion rand plan and said, this is so you can know what we are doing. And of course, he will come to, we're inviting him to our Energy Council to come in at that level. And then, of course, the administration, led by the DG, by Mr. Lester, by any of the other HODs, obviously have further administrative engagements, either through the minister's office, his department, or the energy departments, or directly with Eskom themselves. But funding is a big issue, and it will become an issue over time, and we will definitely try to lobby for our fair share. And maybe that leads into Honourable Nkondlo's question about our budget of 1.1 billion. How much of that is national grants? Our 1.1 billion is not made up of national grants at all. That is a provincial budget process decision. Of course, the national grants that come through the system that land probably at local government level will come through in the reporting processes as we go forward. And then one of the other issues that I raised with the minister, I think it's something we've got to continue raising, is the demand side management plans. We want to partner with national government, but what we also want is we want agreement on incentives. It doesn't help if we spend a lot of our funding and we really get citizens in the province to turn off half their lights and turn off half their heaters and have cold water through winter, but there's no incentive for them to do so. We are busy negotiating, and it was part of the meeting with the national minister to say we need national government to agree to those incentives. If we can save 200 megawatts, can we get relief of 100 megawatts worth of load shedding? Because we must put something into the national grid and into the national system, but it's also got to be beneficial, because otherwise how do we sell it to our residents to say we all need to do what we used to do in the drought, use less water per person. Now we need to use less energy per person to help our country through this crisis, but we also need to help ourselves through this crisis. Then I think in the detail, DG will go through some of the plan detail that we've got, and if we don't have all of it, we'll send it to you from Honourable Dugmore's questions. And then, of course, we will continue to partner with and engage with national government on whether we can negotiate any national agreements. The private sector, this is the Honourable van der Westhuizen's questions. Of course, the funding is going to come primarily from the private sector. The 7 billion that I spoke about across provincial and national government over the next 3 years is a big chunk of money, but it's actually a small amount of money if we're talking about, 5,700 megawatts. If you just think of the 60 megawatts announced by the city a week ago, that's 1.2 billion rand. It's international just transition support from the German government, from the British government, alongside the city. That is a 60 megawatt project of 1.2 billion rand, and it's going to take 2 years to land. That just puts into perspective 60 megawatts versus 5,700 megawatts. This is big investment that's going to have to take place over years into our economy. The magnitude of this is massive. So that 7 billion rand is actually enabling further private sector investment into this energy sector. And then I think maybe Mr. Lester could deal with the storage. I don't exactly know what Honourable Nkondlo's question was about storage capacity, because at the moment, the only real storage capacity in the Western Cape is the city's Stenbros Dam capacity and the national government Meat storage capacity. But of course, new capacity is being tendered for all the time. The 500 megawatts of dispatchable will have, I'm sure, a fair component of storage. And Mr. Lester can talk about the towns where we can go into a lease agreement for towns to become load shedding free. That will also contain a fair amount of storage capacity to make it viable. I think, DG, I'm going to hand over to you, and then perhaps to Mr. Lester. Thank you.
Premier, thank you very much. I'm going to just try and deal with the. There was one question remaining from Member Nkondlo around Knysna and Overstrand and whether that forms part of the 1.1 billion. I think Premier's already indicated it's not. But those are not the only projects. Because Member Nkondlo also asked, are those the only 2 projects? Member Nkondlo would see on that slide. That slide was only trying to capture the 10 largest energy infrastructure projects in the entire province, excluding the city of Cape Town. And even if the member adds it up, you will see in the entire Garden Route, it comes to almost an amount of 333 million. And if needed, one can unpack also some of the other projects, but that then respond to that question. Then I want to just respond to some of the questions that's been raised by Member Dugmore. The 2 million rand for the specialist, that's not the salary for Mr. Albie Lester, because the 2 million has been allocated to the Department of Local Government for specialized support. Mr. Albie Lester is employed by the Department of the Premier, and his salary is paid in this department. And we have already responded to Parliament in relation to that. Then in relation to the 60 million rand for PACs, and I've gone through an extensive explanation. In fact, we've looked at the beneficiaries, and Mr. Dugmore, Member Dugmore is 100% correct that the amount will not be enough to cover all the indigents, and therefore we are looking at partnerships with business and even with some of the municipalities. So just to give the members an indication, there's about 147,000 indigent residents in the 24 municipalities. So that means it's all the municipalities excluding the city of Cape Town. Then the proposal with regards to the residents in the DSD frail care facilities, that's about 10,000 people. And then the number of matriculants in your quintiles 1 to 3 schools, and this now in the entire province, is about 10,500. So if you add up all the numbers, it gets to about 180,000 beneficiaries. So we are looking at obviously how we can look at all the indigents and how we can, within the available funding, look at the rollout. Because obviously one can understand you can never roll out to some people and not to others, but this is something that we are discussing at the moment. Obviously there are discussions with the city of Cape Town to deal with their residents. So we're looking at probably at about 180,000 indigents, plus obviously the matriculants, or including the matriculants in those quintiles, as well as the residents in DSD facilities. And we will engage the Treasury on how to access also the money that sits in reserve to deal with any potential overrun. On the 40 million for LED lighting, and this question also links to the question that was asked by Member van der Westhuizen, specifically around how do we plan to assist schools with load shedding. The plan is to assist particularly our poorest of the poor schools with PVs, particularly we call it roof PV. So if you look at the slide that both Premier and Alvi presented, there has been money that's been allocated previously for solar PV within the budget, but the LED lighting will also go far with regards to obviously managing and helping particularly the poorest of our poorest schools with the electricity bill, etc. So the Department of Education has got a list of schools to which they want to roll out the energy resilience program. And I mean, if the committee would like to get a list of those schools, we're also going to roll out the solar PV. We can definitely engage the department and provide that as part of a written response. In relation to the 40 million, there's also the question that's been asked by a member Dugmore for project prep facility. I think the budget book that's been tabled this year on page number 81, there's an extensive write-up on what it is that we want to do under the Western Cape Energy Resilience Program. This complements obviously what Alvi has already indicated. And what this program basically plans to do is to deal with the generation, procurement, and also the whole issue around low carbon energy. I've spoken extensively of what it is that we want to do within those 5 municipalities as part of the IPP procurement process, the work that we want to do particularly in Stellenbosch, and obviously once that is done over the medium to long term is also to roll it out to other municipalities. So the project preparation facility in the Western Cape will primarily deal with projects, getting them ready to take it to the bank, because obviously all these things must be bankable. Obviously, if the municipalities want to go into some borrowing facilities, and also the development of business cases, energy trading mechanisms, exploring gas to power options, piloting renewable energy solutions in municipalities for own use, the establishment, planning, and financing partnership for green hydrogen production at scale. So one can understand, over the MTF, the amount of project preparation support that is required, and the funding that has been set aside over the MTF is to deal with exactly that. And the member will also note that given that we now have a new Department of Infrastructure, this is probably going to be one of the biggest new initiatives that they need to sort of roll out, and that money will primarily deal with that. And then obviously, as part of us reporting to this committee, reporting to our different standing committees, we will now institute the process of reporting how we are doing with regards to that. So I've responded to, I think, all the questions. The only one that remains, Alvi, is the one to deal with the surcharge levy. And then the names of the Energy Council, I mean, that we can also, I think, provide to the committee in a written response. It's really the Premier chairing it, some key ministers on the council. The council is supported by an Energy Council Tech. Myself and some key HDs also form part of that process. And as and when required, we also pull in municipalities into that. I can also indicate, Chair, that the Premier and I, we've got institutionalized meetings. We met with SATA the other day. We discussed the whole issue around energy and what it is that we're doing with regards to, all our priority areas. And I mean, as and when required, I mean, if there are any external parties or civil society members that would like to, engage with us on this matter, we will definitely do so. But in addition to that, the Premier's also got regular digicons, as we call it. Anybody from the outside is welcome to join in. In fact, I think, Premier, what we can do from the next Energy Council, maybe if Member Dugmore can also supply us with some of those external people that would like to know more about what it is that we're doing in this space, we will definitely extend the invitation to anyone outside. I mean, anybody, whether it doesn't matter which institution you're from, you can actually just join up onto our energy digicon. And, in that way can find out what is happening in the space and also use that, obviously, to input into what it is that we're doing. Because in essence, the role of the Energy Council is just to direct what it is that we're doing in the space, and external input is always welcome. Then on the rebate for taxpayers in terms of the 15,000, I think it's a start. It's almost like during the time when we were dealing, with the water crisis. It was also the time when we were dealing with COVID in relation to, providing some tax rebates for some of these issues. The member will also remember the time, when we were receiving rebates for the installation of blankets, etc., around our geysers and stuff like that. This, I think, is a similar kind of initiative. It is definitely, in my view, not sufficient. I mean, we know what these alternative energy solutions are costing, but it's definitely a start, for private sector and particularly individuals to actually form part of the renewable energy solutions that will be part of our energy resilience program overall. So every little bit help, and I think at least this initiative, that's been tabled by Minister Ngwana will take us far to assist. So, Chair, I think we've responded to all the questions from Member van der Westhuizen, all the questions from Member Kontlo. We've responded to the questions by Member Bartman and all the questions of Member Dugmore, except obviously the one on the surcharge levy. So, Alvi, if you can maybe just deal with that and maybe one or two issues in relation to our current storage capacity.
Thank you, DG. DG, just so on the question around the surcharge that the city charges. So any license holder, whether that be the city or whether that be a municipality, if at any one point they want to increase or have an amendment made to their tariff in the form of a surcharge or a DSM charge, etc., that has to go through the regulator and has to be approved by the regulator. I don't know from the MFMA, if the city is allowed to, let's say, have a different charge either as a tax, etc. I can't really speak to that, but I do know that any charge related to electricity from a license holder has to go through the regulator. So if the surcharge is deemed to be an electricity related charge, then that would have to go through the regulator. Then on the question around storage, I think it's been touched on by the Premier. So currently we have, and storage can really come in two forms. Currently our storage is in the form of dams, and that's hydro. So we've got Steenbras in the case of the city, and we've got Palmit in the case of Eskom. Then you have storage capacity in the form of battery. And at the moment, there are very few battery storage facilities in the country. There was a pilot that was done by Eskom, but they cancelled that pilot because they had some technical issues with the size of the storage facility that we're looking at. And then there are other storage facilities, but not necessarily energy storage facilities. Obviously, the likes of Ankerlig and Gorikwa, which is the open cycle gas turbines that Eskom has available. And also Acacia, they run on diesel. And then obviously there is storage capacity for diesel, which then feeds those generators. So it very much depends on the technology choice that you make. If you're going to go into a PPA, whether that is a grid tied solution. So whether the, let's say, solar panels then feed the grid, in which case it might not have a solar to battery storage solution. It might just be that you're able to provide energy when there is sunlight available. And then obviously at night you can't provide that facility because you have no storage facility. There are almost no wind projects that I'm aware of in this country where we have wind to storage facility. It's mainly been solar, and it's mainly been, you do have a gas storage facility, which is very much like the diesel storage facility, where you can contain the gas and then use them either on a engine or run them through a gasification process where you can then actually create the energy. I must say that our solutions that we are looking at is much lower megawatts than the national sort of reprocess, where they're talking about 450 plus megawatts. Our megawatts, and particularly if I think about the pilot that we'd like to do for 5 towns in the Western Cape to see if we can save them from load shedding, those will be in the region of a maximum of 20 megawatts. So the battery capacity in that case is going to be probably about 4 megawatt amp hours that you would need, megawatt hours that you would need. And that is really just to focus on the load shedding windows. So if you were in a typical stage 4 you know, 4 megawatt amp hours should be sufficient to be able to take you out of that load shedding window. So yes, we don't have currently any storage facilities, both nationally and in the province, other than the Steenbras and Palmit. Nationally, we have the other dams, of course, but no battery storage facilities. I think, DG, there was a question by the member Dugmore around the estimated cost, the megawatt cost. And again, I think this very much relates to the type of technology choices that you make. So right now, the Eskom tariff, Megaflex tariff, sits at about R1.63, and that's before your 18% increase. And this is why you do need transaction advisors, because they also then look at the financial modeling of your tariff, and they would then be able to work out over a 20 or 15-year PPA period, what should be the recommended tariff at the end of that period that you see the savings that will obviously make it viable for that choice of technology. So I can tell you that solar without battery varies between 98 cents a kilowatt hour up to about 115 cents a kilowatt hour. But that is just solar straight onto the network, no battery capacity. If you add battery capacity in, that number jumps to anywhere from R2.80 up to about R3.03 per megawatt hour. But again, your PPA is quite critical because it does give you that negotiation tool over your 20-year period that you can negotiate better rates. And obviously, we then use the Megaflex tariff to baseline to say this is typically where we should be looking at, that price or lower. DG, I think I've covered the questions that were outstanding. I think between yourself and the Premier, you've done the balance. But if there is anything else, I'm open to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Albi. For that, Chair, I think we've responded to all the questions. So back to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Mlila. Member Brinkhuis, I know that you had your hand up. Are there any other questions in this round?
Yes, no, thank you very much, Chair. Can I go, Chair? Am I audible?
Yes, you can.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, good afternoon to the Premier. Good afternoon to all the colleagues. My question is around vandalism and the cable theft. I want to know that in this project of the Western Cape, how are we going to approach the scrapyards whereby the criminals, if they do these cable thefts and infrastructure vandalism, they go to the scrapyards and they get a lot of money through this cable theft, and it is costing government millions and billions per year. How are we going to tackle that issue? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Member Brinkhuis. Member Nkondlo and then Member Bartman.
Thank you,
Thank you very much. As I'll go after Member Nkondlo. Thanks, Chair.
No, sorry, I didn't see your name, your hand there. I said Member Nkondlo, Member Bartman, and then Member Dugmore. Member Nkondlo?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just a follow-up on the battery storage question and the response by Mr. Lester and the Premier. Just wanted to ask them, are they not aware of the battery storage projects that are taking place right here in the Western Cape? One of them in Vredendal, in the Matsikama municipality. Another one in Cederberg and Breda Valley, just to name a few. And these are projects that have been initiated by Eskom and with the purpose of exactly, whilst I acknowledge, that is why I had to ask the question about battery storage, that to date here in the country that has got this energy crisis, including which Western Cape is part of, the reality of the matter is that we would need to have such storage capacity, because one of the biggest problems of the solar projects that have started so many years ago, and I'm sure you can go right here in Atlantis, just on the housing projects that government would have placed some solar on tops of their roofs, where that particular challenge of not having such a storage make actually such an investment is value, to be highly reduced, particularly, and an inconvenience to those that have got that particular technology. Because if you go to those houses, RDP houses here in Atlantis, all of those things now become a wet elephant. They're sitting on tops of those roofs because they can only be warm when the sun is out. And during winter season, they become useless. And that is why you need such a storage capacity. So I'm actually concerned that actually this issue of storage capacity in the response that one was given is as if it is not a priority and it is not in the country. Yes, that is true. And that is why there is a project funded by the World Bank because of the importance of if you transition to renewables, you would need to have such a capacity. So my question still stands, and I'm hoping that one would get some, unless I've missed in what both the Premier and Mr. Lester were responding to. Now, the other question, Chair, I wanted to understand, can we be told who are the 3 private sector companies that have been allowed a willing agreement that was mentioned in one of the slides? And can such a willing framework and the tariff support that is referred to, can such be shared with us so that we understand what is contained in that, what are some of the provisions of such a framework? And lastly, Chair, in the energy packs, I hear the DG speaks about the selection process is still being discussed and engaged with different stakeholders. And I'm interested to know how is the risk, and I'm hoping if it has not been answered, if you can clarify if it is one of the things that have been identified, given the fact that, at this point we are towards elections by next year, and we've seen this thing in the food parcels during the period of COVID, where a politically influence was used, to actually give such food parcels. So how is such a threat going to be managed in giving out these energy packs as and when they are being distributed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo, Member Bartman, and then Member Dugmore.
Thank you. My first question was partly dealt with by Member Nkondlo regarding the battery storage project from Eskom through the World Bank. My understanding is that the World Bank sponsored or funded 10 of them in South Africa, and 7 of them are in the Western Cape. And I just want to know what happened to these. Are they able to assist us in that particular project with battery storage? And secondly, the Western Cape government completed a study with the USTDA regarding LNG or liquefied natural gas importation. And I do see that there is gas power exploration funding on the budget for the province. So regarding this gas exploration, has TNPA and Eskom indicated whether they are committed to installing and or upgrading the infrastructure required for the importation of LNG? Especially if we import via Saldanha, then ideally Ankerlig would be the main off-taker, or maybe if there are some big energy users in the area. Alternatively, whether they wish to bring this in via containers. I do know there are currently businesses within the Saldanha Bay IDZ who are able to help in the value chain of gas importation. And I just want to understand the commitment from our stakeholders, as it's very unlikely to be able to do it without them. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Bartman. Member Dugmore.
Thanks very much, Chair. Chair, I just want to put on record that, I really welcome the appointment of Mr. Laker. I think we need all, the experience and expertise that we have, not only in the Western Cape, but across the country, to work towards a proper just transition to a less carbon intensive energy supply. but that also, we need to acknowledge that we have an energy mix, and we have to understand that there's a critical issue related to coal, involvement of workers, costing these issues, and so on. And I'm sure Mr. Lake will add experience. I just wanted, so my question about the remuneration, has got nothing to do with, a concern about the appointment, but maybe I missed something in the response of the DG about the salary. I just think it's important, and that's why we have a committee like this, to also track expenditure on consultants. I mean, we have raised before our concern that the Municipal Energy Resilience Project, and possibly that's just another question for the record, we can just understand how much had been spent on that project, which I understand started as far back as 2020 or 2021. And where did that money actually go? Can we get a breakdown of which consultants were actually paid to do that work? Then I think there is a real opportunity for schools in regard to solar. And excuse me, and I just wondered if there was any more detail about what solutions are actually offered to schools, by government or with partners, because there is a serious benefit to schools if they can become energy self-sufficient. That will save them. And then that brings me to the last question. Mr. Laker did, and I want to thank him for that, give us a response regarding the role of the regulator. And I just wondered if possibly local government, MEC Bradell or the HOD could inform us whether the City of Cape Town in particular has received an approval from the NER in regard to their surcharge. And that brings then to the last issue. I mean, a lot of municipalities rely on a surcharge to actually fund their own budgets, to cross-subsidize. Now, in regard to everything that we're discussing, what is the financial modeling in regard to the existing revenue which municipalities receive from selling on the Eskom power, and how will that affect the sustainability of local governments in our province? And that was why, Chair, I thought it would be particularly important, and I'm sure at the next meeting we will have the National Minister and Salga Western Cape here, because that is a real issue, is the sustainability of local government funding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Dugmore. Dr. Malila, Mr. Premier, you want to answer those follow-up questions? Dr. Malila, for some reason I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, sir.
Wonderful. Chair, I was just trying to go through my responses. I recall that we have provided a response on the matter of the enumeration of special advisors in my department. I was just trying to actually, check it on my computer. If not, I can resubmit that information. Obviously, Mr. Lester, he is appointed as a special advisor, and I mean the current regulatory frameworks allows for the appointment of special advisors by the Premier within the department of the Premier. Obviously, the remuneration levels are not set by us. That is determined nationally. So we normally send up a submission, whoever we want to appoint, and then we make certain proposals, and then the final say actually comes from national. So I can also indicate that, we are in full compliance to that, but I can maybe, if I need to reply to it in writing in relation to salary levels, etc., I'd rather actually prefer to do that, Chair, and I'll also send that issue to you. Here on the solutions to the schools, I'd also prefer that we actually provide a full list of all the solutions to the schools, because remember the Department of Education have got various mechanisms of supporting schools, particularly in relation to either norms and standards. And I mean, I'm sure Member Dagmar knows that. So I mean, he's also been responsible for that at the point in his life. And then the other issue where we normally support municipalities is also in relation to, you know, service charges and stuff like that. And I know over the last while we've supported municipalities kind of with arrear accounts, whether it was at energy or with water. So in relation to this, to our energy plan, the two initiatives, obviously the one relates particularly to solar PV, and that is particularly the stuff that goes onto the roofs of municipalities, and then obviously also with some other support to make sure that we can actually, you know, have teaching happening in schools when we have to deal with load shedding. But Chair, I would rather prefer to get the full list of initiatives and supply that to you. Alternatively, maybe when we report again to this committee, you know, that you can actually call on the Department of Education to actually come, and we can maybe, you know, even in the next meeting talk about what are those initiatives specifically in education, what are those key initiatives, Premier touched on it, specifically in health, and what are the key initiatives, you know, in the general public works building, which actually impacts on the citizens generally. So maybe for the next meeting, I think that would actually be a good idea. On the issue of what's happening in local government, I mean, Graham can maybe talk to that, and maybe also, Graham, you know, what you are doing in assisting municipalities with regards to the issues on vandalism, because I'm sure it's the same issue, you know, that we spoke about when we supported municipalities with the issue of generators, because there is a sense, you know, that we install the stuff and then only for it to be vandalized. So if you can maybe just deal with those particular issues. I think the other comment from Member Duck was just welcoming the appointment, and I think that is quite key. And then I didn't fully get the issue around the report on consultants for the work done in 2021. So, Chair, I mean, you can maybe also put that to us in writing, and we can formally respond to that. I didn't get that fully. And then maybe just a response to the question by Member Nkondlo. Member Nkondlo, exactly that is why I made the point that this is no easy matter. We are well aware as an administration that we've got the 2024 elections coming up, and we don't want to have any conflict in terms of what it is that we want to do now for the citizens of this province as a government and not as a party, but also the risk related to that particular issue. And that is why we said what mechanisms are already in place that is not in any way kind of conflicted with, let's call it, party political positions. And that is why we said that the indigent register is a nationally accepted mechanism to dealing with vulnerable people, to dealing with indigents, to dealing with the poorest of the poor. So we've gone to the documents of municipalities, to each of their respective budgets which they've tabled. You know, we've looked at their different IDPs, and we've also consulted Stats SA, because Stats SA has also got different mechanisms to look at poverty index, you know, who's poor, up to an enumeration level. And what we want to do, Member Nkondlo, with the rollout of this, we also don't want to involve, you know, our political principles in this necessarily. So what we want to do is we want to appoint an independent contractor that takes responsibility, you know, for the, let's call it, procurement of the stuff, plus the distribution of these energy packs. And we want to make use of municipal officials that should assist the service provider in doing this. What we also indicated is we also want to have some post-audit process to actually also deal with it. That doesn't mean to say that these things are not going to happen. Okay, and I mean, I want to put it onto the table now, because obviously we're talking about 24 municipalities, but we will lay down the rules right up front, and we will have the necessary governance arrangements in place to make sure at least that that risk is covered. So Member Nkondlo is correct in identifying that risk, and we as an administration have identified that risk. So we will do our best to make sure that the stuff gets to people who really needs it and gets to the most vulnerable citizens of this province, hopefully in every ward, in every municipality. And again, Chair, we will use the mechanisms that's been put in place through this committee to account. I mean, in the same way that we've done during COVID, we had an open, transparent process in terms of our procurement, how we spend, etc. And we plan to do exactly the same with regards to the energy funding that's been set aside. And I think in the municipal space, they've got their own oversight processes to deal and to report on their processes. I don't know, Premier, can I at this stage hand over to you maybe to deal with some of those other matters? Thanks.
All right, great. Thank you very much, DG. Can I say that, Honourable Brinkcase, I also just want to mention further to what DG said on vandalism, and obviously this, this committee is looking at how do we deal with this crisis. We've seen in Mr. Lester's presentation, specifically looking at those municipalities that we're helping with the potential rollout of these load shedding mitigating mechanisms of a lease project. Part of it is saying, can the municipality from their side put together what the safety plan is around making sure that we're protecting that asset? Is there security to make sure we don't want the cable stolen or the solar panel stolen or the whole system stolen, etc. So we've got to make sure that we have those programs in place. But obviously, over and above that, the question that you're asking is a general question, which is a big issue for us. But it's not necessarily, within the 1.1 billion rand program to have a cable theft program within that. Bring it into the. Then I think DG has answered the question around the risk. Of course, I actually want to not say too much. I actually need the administration to deal with that because of exactly the risk that the Honourable Nkondlo brought out. All municipalities are involved, but how do we make sure it's not politically abused, etc. But on the other point from Member Nkondlo, yes, absolutely, we are fully aware of the battery storage program being rolled out by Eskom. In actual fact, I was supposed to be part of the official opening ceremony of the first system based in Worcester, the Hex, the one in the Hex Valley, or the Hex Battery Energy Storage System, as they call it best. Unfortunately, that was supposed to take place on the 4th of April, but a notice that we got on the 24th of March saying, unfortunately, it has been postponed. So we will be part of that rollout process, and absolutely, we are fully aware of that program. Then I want to say the question about Honourable Bartman and gas. We've got some further funding on gas. I think some work has been done over many years with gas within the province. The Department of Economic Development and Tourism did a lot of work quite a few years ago, even to the space where we have EIAs on a piece of land next to the Ankerlig diesel plant, which said, how do we enable even expansion of that plant once it goes to gas, because then it can be, instead of a peaking plant, it can go to mid-delivery. Obviously, that work is also looking at how, is there anything we need to upgrade on that work, and I think it is relevant in Saldanha. It's also relevant in Mossel Bay. I can also say that I haven't checked.
We've lost you there, Premier. I can't seem to hear you.
Am I back on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what you missed there, but the gas question, that obviously we are working with it. There is further funding for it, and I know that Eskom as well has got funding for it. So it is definitely part of the Freeport of Saldanha. It is part of even the 500 megawatts that the city have put out, because it's dispatchable, so gas could fall into that process as well. That would include Atlantis and the current land. It would need the EIA to be reenacted, but it also includes, as I said, Saldanha and Mossel Bay. And then perhaps on the last point on Member Dugmore's question around municipalities, it is an issue that municipalities have been raising with us, and I know that the Treasury as well as the Department of Local Government are engaging on looking at the financial model for municipalities based on what is happening around the energy crisis. First of all, more companies almost going off the grid, and what I said earlier on is that we don't want off grid. We would actually like, and part of the overall plan at the end of the day. But you are absolutely, team have committed to working on that financial model because it is going to have a huge impact on municipal income across the board. Chair, I don't know if Mr. Lester wants to add anything, or actually Paulson, or any of the actuallys.
Thank you, Premier. Premier, can I just cover the question around the private sector companies and the wheeling framework? I think I was making an example of what the wheeling framework would cover. There aren't specifically any companies that I'm referring to, but typically in a wheeling framework, what would happen is you could have an entity or a company, private company that sits in a municipality that is able to generate energy. And so what it wants to do, it wants to then, any excess energy it has, it then wants to sell it to another customer that sits somewhere else in a municipal or Eskom network. And that financial agreement or arrangement to use that network, that either municipal or Eskom network, that is what the wheeling framework would cover. So that would really sort of determine what would be the price of the wheeling, under which conditions can you wheel, at what times of the day can you wheel, and typically what kind of megawatts or kilowatts can you wheel on that particular network. So it wasn't three companies specifically. I think I was just, maybe I was not sort of clear enough in my explanation, but that's really is what we've been doing in terms of the wheeling framework support for municipalities, is to give them a base from which to work when they are approached by other private sectors or other entities that want to wheel across their network. Thank you, Premier.
Thanks, Alvi. Chair, back to you.
Thank you very much to the Premier, to the DG, and to the team. Members, if there are no further questions, I would like to say thank you to the Premier and thank you to his team for giving us that comprehensive outline on the strategy and the plans. And we look forward to seeing you again sometime soon for an update on the energy resilience plan and an update on where we are post during the course of winter. So thank you very, very much, and you can be excused. Sorry,
Chairman.
Yes,
I've just been reconnected by Eskom. If you will allow me, if not, I'll stand down.
One question.
If you will allow me one question.
Yes, one question.
Yes. Am I allowed?
Yes, you are allowed, sir. One question.
Thank you. Chair, Premier, you know these farms, they used to have all these, what do you call it, that they drew water from underground, windmills, we used to call it windmills, old-fashioned windmills. Why can't that be, your engineers look at it and see if it can be modified to draw water from dams instead of electricity, and the windmills can draw water from dams and then use for farm to sort of spray crops on farms where there is no water. Shall we not look at local innovations instead of always looking for overseas examples of what they do? Hierdie windmele wat daar op die plaas is, ou windmele wat nie meer gebruik word nie, miskien kan hulle dit inspan en kyk of ons ingenieurs iets kan doen om hierdie windmele te gebruik, en dan kan hulle ook miskien besproeiing daarmee doen sonder om van elektrisiteit gebruik te maak. Is dit 'n enkele idee? Dankie.
Thank you, Member Marie. Dr. Medina, do you want to add your comment to that?
Yeah, I think what we can do is maybe to take that point and when we have our own internal deliberations, to actually discuss. I think the I mean, my own logic tells me that potentially not a lot of energy that can be created, because remember we also create energy through these big dams and stuff that we've got. But it's something I think that we can just take into our discussions, and then hopefully at the next meeting, you know, or maybe when I respond to you when the next load of questions come, we can also respond to you on the efficiency of those systems and the potential of it. But I mean, I would like to thank the member for at least providing some new ideas, you know, that one can test on the systems, whether it's in a kind of a global or just on an individual basis. So he's been thinking about, you know, every little bit that can help to alleviate the issue of load shedding, etc. So thanks for that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you to the Premier and to the team. We look forward to the official replies to the questions that you said you will give us at the close of business today. And thank you very much. You and your team and the HODs are excused from the meeting as we proceed with the business of the committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm just waiting for them to be excused from the meeting. All right, thank you. Members, we will now move on to resolutions and actions. Member Dagmore, I want to answer your question or your point. Yes, Member van der Westhuizen.
Sorry, this is a potential resolution. Please go ahead first, Chair.
Okay, and then Member Bartman? No.
Apologies.
Okay.
Apologies. I also wanted to make resolutions. I'll wait. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Before we go on to the resolution, I just want to give some feedback to Member Dagmore and to the committee as to the national minister. We have approached the national minister's office, and they have reverted with the 24th of May as the date on which they are available to speak to us, which coincides with us after our constituency period. That meeting will also be attended by the acting CEO of Eskom, Mr. Caleb Kassim, as well as the National Minister of Energy, Minister Jose Ramokgopa. We will engage with Salga Western Cape to find out whether they are available as well. But what I would say is that as far as my resolutions are concerned, that we ask all 30 municipalities as well as all 13 provincial departments to call them in either in clusters or one by one as to what their plans are to mitigate the effects of load shedding on their respective competencies and their respective functions. So, Member Dagmore, the minister is coming, Salga is coming, and at present it is the 24th of May. I also would like to put to the committee that we have an oversight visit to Ankerlig. We arrange an oversight visit to Ankerlig as well as to Koeberg power stations to see exactly how these power stations are faring in the West in terms of generating electricity, and what is the state of play at Koeberg especially. Are there any other resolutions for now or any other comments that the members would like to make? Member Bartman and Member van der Westhuizen?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with all of the ones that you have indicated, and especially with Ankerlig and Goriqua that the Economic Committee has visited previously. I would like to ask that on the agenda that they also include their maintenance and infrastructure upgrade plans, as well as regarding Koeberg. I would suggest regarding the departments that we perhaps cluster those that, for example, don't have entities, and perhaps those who have entities or a lot of entities that we have those all at once. And then I would also like to suggest there are a number of wind and solar farms within the Western Cape as part of the National RIPE program, REIPP, from Mineral and Energy Department. If we could perhaps engage the National Mother Department, whether we can go and visit them, so that, because I know that some solar and wind farms, they procured only for a certain amount of energy nationally in the program, but sometimes they make more energy than what they are procured for. So there might be additional energy they might be able to put into the grid, but also for us to get an understanding of how they run their corporate responsibility and their respective community trusts. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Barbara. Member from the Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, just a little intro. During COVID, we discovered that a lot of service delivery sites closed down or people were not as productive. And I'm referring, for example, to the deeds office and so on. Now, my concern is that there are maybe some Western Cape provincial departments or service delivery points that may also be suffering badly from load shedding, where, you know, the public may queue and they may not be assisted because the computers are not working, etc. And I would like us to ask the Director General of the province to indicate to us where they believe such production delays or service delivery delays may be the worst, and, you know, what money or what plans are being put into place to assist in those cases, so that we don't, you know, after 6 months now suddenly discover that there's, say, a backlog of 2 months with the distribution of medicine to patients, or, you know, things like that. But so that we very early on already can be assured that all those pressure points have been identified. So my proposal is that for a list of those points where service delivery are still is still being hampered, and, you know, what would be needed to relieve those points. May I just add, and this is not necessary for the resolution itself, but quite often, you know, we look at the cost of solar or the installations, but we do not look at the lost or the cost of lost productivity for people being paid, earning salaries, that are unable then to fulfill their jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen. Member Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would want to support, I think, the suggestions that you have made. In addition to that, Chair, I would want to request that I think there is the gas project in which is done by DMRE in Karoo that has been on the cards for some time. I'm sure in the discussions or the invites of national departments, it would be important to just get some updates to that particular project. And also, I think there was one oversight visit we had done with the Saldanha IDZ, and at the time, I think there were some plans together with Transnet at the time to look at, infrastructure that will be able to ensure transmission and distribution as a pipeline of that particular gas. And one, I think, is interested to understand how these, because you see the questions that I think also relates to what Member Dagmo was raising, is the relationship of the projects that are done at a national level and what we will be doing through our 1.1 billion. Because in any way, as it's always argued, I think by Member Bartman, these all are coming from the national fiscus, and it is important for us to ensure value for money, and we ensure integration to the benefit of what we're trying to curb, load shedding for our households and for industries. So that is one would be interested to you for this platform to try and get us, what is also happening there, so that if there are any discussions that will be provided for, at our level with some of the DMRE initiatives, that we can be able to ask them to come in and update us. So I'm asking of our Saldanha IDZ partnership with Transnet if we can get an update, and the one in Central Karoo, Chair, if we can request such. And I'm hoping we can ask the DG to come back once their framework to distribute the energy packs have been concluded, so that they present to us, we get a clear understanding of how, as administration, they would then take into cognizance all the elements of the data from Stats SA, the indigent, and all of that, to know how is these energy packs are going to be distributed. So I'm sure we can ask them once they've finalized that work, that we are able to sort of get to understand that. So those are the two proposals that I want to make for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. Member Murray.
Thank you so much, sir. I just wanted to know, in terms of our policy, that we will get the public inputs always, and that we will keep the public informed. How we must look at how we most effectively can convey what we are busy with to small businesses. I see a lot of them are struggling. I've personally been approached by many of these small businesses, was concerned. I cannot walk in a supermarket or a shopping center without one or two people coming and say, what is going to happen? What are you doing? What must we do? We must close every day, half day. Is there a way that we can consider calling such an imbizo, or whatever you call it, to invite small businesses and to tell them what we're about and what we've heard from the Premier today and from his department? That's all I would like to say. We must keep it as an item which must be discussed and pursued.
Thank you, Member Murray. What we can do is we can, advertise whenever there's a meeting. You can advertise to everybody to say that the meeting is open, because our meetings are open to the public. And if they want any input, they're more than welcome to provide that input. And they're more than welcome to attend our meetings, unless we have a closed meeting, which I don't foresee us happening anytime soon. And these meetings are all advertised via our stakeholder unit anyway. So everybody will know. And if they want anything else, they can obviously contact my office, and we will send the relevant detail. Members, if there are no further resolutions or actions, we just have to consider and adopt the draft committee minutes of 4th of April. That was distributed to everybody. Ms. Kuta, if you can have it on there, please. Thank you. Page 1. Just check that your attendance is all recorded there. Page 2. If there's anything that anybody wishes to add. And then page 3 is just the space for my signature. For those of us who were in the previous meeting, is there an adopter of the minutes?
Adopt, Chair.
Thank you, Member Christians. We don't need a seconder, but would there be anybody that wishes to second? No?
Support.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen. With that, members, if there's no further deliberations, I wish to thank you for your time for this very important meeting and this very important time that we're living in, and contributing to make sure that the residents of the Western Cape get the best possible service out of our government. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend, and especially have a great Workers' Day on Monday. This meeting is adjourned.